The Far Reach Inn, a building nestled deep inside a wisteria forest. While the employees and travelers residing in this cozy little place did not know the true reason as to why the inn had been constructed here, they did appreciate the beauty of the area to its fullest, and the tranquil quiet of the forest that got especially calming during a light rain in the summer. Hunters of the local wildlife favored the bar that had been constructed in its basement, and at least half of the available rooms and sleeping areas were always occupied. Only a handful of people, however, knew the reason as to why this place had been chosen. It wasn't the traffic, not even the scenic beauty, but the wisteria itself. Of course, a place like this attracted a certain type of person: demon slayers. The core knew of the inn, knew of the people, and it was recommended that whenever a mission was on the way to the building or close to it, that a detour was made. This is how Tanjiro, Inosuke, and Zenitsu ended up in this place one late night. The slayers were beat and spent, only barely having survived an encounter with one of the 12 Kizuki. Worst of all, the demon had gotten away, so the morale had been pretty low. Zenitsu had been injured on top of that, so the three had decided to stay a while. The inn had seemingly only 3 employees plus the 2 owners, a nice elderly couple. However, during the first night the slayers stayed here, Tanjiro lied awake. He was worried about Nezuko. The demon girl was safe in her box from the poisonous effects of a wisteria, but still, he couldn't shake the thought that something terrible was going to happen. He turned onto his side, only to be greeted by the horrified face of Zenitsu. Tanjiro blinked. "What's wrong?" Can't you hear that?" he cried. The slayer sighed. Hear what?" "This terrible creaking noise. It sounds like a ghost. I can't kill a ghost, Tanjiro!" Concerned for Inosuke's sleep, Tanjiro gently bopped the blonde slayer's nose to get his attention. Zenitsu looked at him. "Why did you do that?" "So you calm down and listen to me." The cowardly slayer sniffled. "Even if there was a ghost, you're injured. Do you really think we let you fight like that?" So the boy shook his head. "See? Will you fight the ghost then, Tanjiro?" He sighed, not being in the mood to argue. "Yeah, sure." After closing the sliding door behind him, Tanjiro realized he had no idea where to even start looking. Unlike the blonde, he couldn't hear the noise. And the inn was drowned in darkness. It was bedtime after all. His gaze was locked on the ceiling, hoping for a hatch or maybe a ladder. Or stairs. Tanjiro was about to give up when he noticed an open door leading to an empty room. There, hanging from the center, was a thin rope attached to a wooden square. He smiled. Tanjiro knew he shouldn't go around snooping, but now a childlike curiosity had awoken inside of him. Slowly he creeped towards the rope and pulled it. The square opened, surprisingly quietly, as a very narrow staircase slid down from it. The slayer was excited, his heartbeat going faster and faster as he slowly went up into the hidden attic. He found himself in a dark hallway. and if it wasn't for a window letting in moonlight, he would have been blind. He took a quick whiff of the air. It smelled like old books, oil, and flowers. Then his eyes narrowed. Mixed in was a human smell. So there was someone up here after all. The attic was surprisingly clean, probably cleaner than the rest of the entire inn. It consisted of 3 rooms, 2 of which were open. The room to his left was completely filled with shelves and cupboards containing loose items, probably a simple storage room. Piles of books were scattered about the room as well. The room on his right was covered in paintings. They went from crude to slightly more skilled. He recognized the style of a few of them as the paintings that were hung all around the inn downstairs. A few white canvases were stacked at the opposite end, and a small table were neatly sorted tools for painting and drawings. Finally, the last room. It had a door that was closed, so he kept it for last. Slowly he approached it, and finally he could hear it, a metallic creaking. With a shaking hand he opened the door. The room was lit up by 2 paper lanterns. A futon was placed under a window, and on a table was an unlit candle, an empty soup bowl, and 3 books, one of which was open. A few worn kimonos were scattered on the ground, but most strikingly was you. There, sitting on a small metal wheeled chair, was your slouched-over form. Your hair covered most of your face, save for your left eye, which was unblinkingly focused on the Slayer. You were dressed in a beautiful white kimono, just like the one scattered on the ground. You didn't look malnourished, but still very frail. "You shouldn't be here," you said in a hushed voice. Tanjiro felt awkward. He would definitely hit Zenitsu on the head the next time he got the chance. You tilted your head slightly. "Why aren't you leaving?" you asked curiously. In truth, he did not expect this entire scenario, so he was simply flabbergasted. After another minute of him just staring at you, you asked, "Who are you?" Tanjiro bit his tongue so he could focus. Shaking his head, he said, Tanjiro Kamado. I'm a demon slayer." You blinked, then slowly smiled. "Good. Demons need to die," you said. "Why are you here? Did my parents send you?" "Parents?" He was confused. "The owners of this place." I guess they didn't." "Why are you here?" He forced a friendly smile. "I could ask you the same," he said jokingly, before adding, "Me and my companions were hunting a very dangerous demon, and now we need some time to recover. We're close to the end, so might as well. One of my companions, I guess, hurt your wheelchair and got worried." You nodded. He seemed friendly enough. You grabbed your wheels and pushed yourself a little further back into the room. "Well, come in," you said. He slowly entered further, and after a quick nod sat down on the ground. "And now you know me, their daughter. What would you like to know more? I haven't spoken to a new person in a very long time." Tanjiro sighed sadly. Well, why are you up here? You chuckled darkly and then pointed at the wheelchair. Isn't it obvious? They're afraid I hurt myself. That made sense. He felt stupid for even asking. Why are you in a wheelchair? You blinked. Is it okay if I answer that on a later date? He blushed. Yeah, sorry, I didn't realize I was being insensitive. You smiled. You have a surprising lack of common sense. But maybe that's what a person needs to become a slayer. The helpless smile he gave you made you chuckle. Hey, I saw the drawing equipment in the other room. I assume you did that? You nodded. Did my parents hang up my paintings as they promised? You asked. There are paintings downstairs, and yes, they do look similar to what you drew. You sighed in relief, never really having believed they kept them. You hated your art. Whenever your parents brought you a new painting or flower as inspiration, it never came out quite as you imagined it. But you took this as confirmation. As yes, your art was good enough to be displayed in the inn. Tanjiro kept entertaining you for another hour before returning back to his room. You smiled, knowing you had made a friend. Following this, the Slayer visited your room every night, just to talk to you and to give you company. He told you about his adventures, his friends, his life, but he had quickly picked up on your distaste for demons, so he kept Nezuko out of his stories just in case. However, today he had sad news. Zenitsu was back to health, and tomorrow they would continue pursuing the Kizuki. He wondered how you would react to that. As per usual, he entered your room quietly. Silence was important, as to not alert anyone, especially your parents. Still, though, you haven't told him why all this was happening to you. Hey, he greeted with a bright smile. When Tanjiro entered, you had been reading a book. Looking up from it, you smiled. Good evening, you said. He sat down in his usual place before continuing. Zenitsu is all but ready to leave. This means we will continue our demon hunting. Your heart jumped, and you looked at the ground. Are you going to die? He blinked. It's hard to tell, but I won't give up. He paused. But yes, death is something that could happen. And this might be the last time I see you. You were dejected, hoping that either he'd stay with you or at least a little bit longer. In truth, you had planned on telling him your secret, just not yet. So through these circumstances, you had to push it to now. Especially since you may never see him again. Tanjiro, you said. I like you. He smiled. I like you too, he answered. No, I mean, really like you. This solitary confinement that is my life. I never really had a friend before, and I feel very attracted to you. He blushed, realizing what you were talking about. I wanted to tell you this later, but now I'm forced to say it now. With one hand, you swiped away the bangs that covered the other half of your face. Tanjiro's eyes widened in horror. It was covered in deep, vicious scars and bite marks. Your other eye was missing. what was most likely just a hole, was hidden behind the bandage. Even a piece of your mouth was just gone, revealing your teeth behind it. This would explain the smell of oils around you. They were used to keep the damage on you from infecting. Then you pulled up your kimono. Tanjiro had guessed something was wrong with your legs, but that they were outright missing he did not expect. The two stumps ended where your knees should have been. Your heart was beating faster. My sister did this, you said, a single tear coming out of your good eye. She was a demon. Your head sunk. I want you to kill all of them, you sobbed. Meanwhile, the Slayer stood up. Almost expecting him to just leave after seeing your ghastly appearance, your sobbing got louder. But then, you felt a warm body embrace you. Sharply you exhaled. Tanjiro, you huffed. It's okay. You don't have to say anything, he muttered. Your face flushed red instantly, unable to comprehend what was happening. Your parents had locked you up here, for your safety, to protect you from any danger. They gave you books, painting tools, things to write your own stories, but they never hugged you, never even touched you, afraid they could hurt you. Your touch-starved body immediately overreacted, heating up, clouding your mind. Desperately your hands took a hold of his back, your fingers clawing at his clothes as if you were strong enough to tear the fabric. What are you doing? He asked quietly. I want you, Tanjiro. His brows furrowed. He couldn't see your face as it was buried into his chest, but he could tell you were crying. He'd be lying if he said he didn't develop some feelings for you over these past days. He quietly puffed up his cheeks. You probably read about these things in your books, he thought. Your reality being based mostly on novels and fantasy. The Slayer sighed in defeat. Fine, he said. Removing your head from his chest, you looked up into his eyes as he softly pressed his lips onto yours. A soft groan came from you. And once both your faces separated, you gasped. You can still decline, he said helplessly. But instead you reached for his shoulders, allowing him to lift you out of the wheelchair. You were so light, lighter than even Nezuko. Gently set you down on your futon. I love you, Tanjiro, you whispered, just loud enough for him to hear. He smiled and began to unbutton his shirt. Your eyes widened upon seeing his toned body. With one hand you reached up to his chest, your pale fingers gently gliding across his battle scars. So even a Slayer like you gets hurt from time to time. Softly he patted your head, and you sharply exhaled, wanting more, so much more. Tanjiro got closer again, kneeling down next to you as once again he kissed you. One of his hands slid into your kimono, cupping one of your breasts. You groaned and let yourself fall on your sheets. Please, I want you to use me. I want you. Please, make me feel alive.